Welcome. This is episode 10 of Mindwatch. Yeah, interesting to look back at the last 9 weeks and lovely to be back after having missed a week the last time. Welcome, Alex, Peter, the other Peter, Sri. Thank you for being here. And some of us are watching this later on YouTube, so welcome. So let me start by introducing the idea and the structure of Mindwatch, and then we will step into the conversation for today. So Mindwatch started off 10 weeks ago as an experiment between Ashok and me. Ashok is joining in from Washington, D.C. I'm based in Mumbai, and the idea was to attempt to practice metacognition. That's the simple intent and purpose behind these conversations, to take up ideas and themes and topics which concern us in the world that we live in today, and to in the course of the conversation to notice how we are thinking about these ideas and concepts as we are thinking and talking about it. So that's the intent of the conversation. So therefore, as we go along, you will notice that the conversation is not so much about the nitty-gritties of the content related to the topic of the day as much as to start noticing and unpacking how are we thinking about what we are thinking about. And while the conversation is primarily between Ashok and myself, the invitation to all of us who are here and listening in is to also notice your thought process. So if you notice yourself having a reaction to something that Ashok or I say, or if you find yourself in agreement or disagreement with something, we will invite you to pause and think about what's the process behind that agreement or disagreement or whatever it is that pops up for you in that moment. So while it may seem like you may not have too much of an opportunity as a listener to speak and contribute vocally in this conversation, it certainly can be tiring at the end of 90 minutes because if you've done the process right, if you've engaged well, you would be thinking a lot about how you're thinking as we speak. So the broad structure is that the first about 60 minutes or so is a conversation between Ashok and me. And in the last 30 minutes, we will attempt to also respond to questions or reflections that you could share on chat. Of course, you don't need to wait till the last 30 minutes of the conversation to share that. As we go along, if there's things that come to your mind, please put them up on the Zoom chat and we will attempt to weave them into our conversation as we go. So that's a broad introduction. And with that, let's dive into the topic for today. And yeah, as I think about it, it feels like a very, it's a conversation that sits at a very uncomfortable crossroad of our times, right? That there, in narratives, in various spaces in life, that there is this elevation of lived experience. The idea that what I feel, what I know through my life is the unassailable truth. And on the other hand, strangely enough, there is also the rise of artificial intelligence. And so we are also contending with systems that can process data, systems that can work with a sense of speed and precision that we perhaps cannot even humanly fathom. And they can, these are systems that have the capacity to synthesize entire disciplines and compose music and poetry and offer medical diagnoses within seconds now. So we are living in this world of contrasts where on the one hand there's this huge reverence for lived experience, and on the other, we are also creating very actively and in a very unreserved way systems of artificial intelligence, which of course have nothing to do with lived experience. So the question that we are holding today is in the context of all this. On the one hand, if lived experience tells me everything that I need to know, presumably, and AI can potentially fill in things that I do not know, where is the scope for learning? What becomes of the human mind? And I don't mean human mind in a mechanical way, not as an information processor, but as a human mind that makes meaning of life, as a mind that is capable of moral discernment, it's capable of imagination and wonder. What happens to that when we are living between this juxtaposition of lived experience and artificial intelligence? And yeah, there's of course a lot of questions that I'm sitting with on this front. But yeah, let me pause for now, and Ashok, let me bring you in for your opening remarks, and we can flow from there.
Thank you, Rukmini. And I don't have anything to add in terms of opening remarks because you have done such a wonderful job of uh, stating the purpose, our process, and defining the two seemingly contradictory ideas that we are sitting with today: lived experience and artificial intelligence. So, the first thing, in fact, I'm going to throw it back to you because I'd like to hear from you, Rukmini. What you see as the connections between lived experience and artificial intelligence, and what and how that works. How do you see them related, or are we trying to artificially put together two things which really are very separate? And I would also invite you to ask me specific questions as we move along, because otherwise, I am afraid that I will digress and go down into my own pet peeves about all these topics. So, why don't you kick it off by talking about the connections that you see here?
Um, so I think of and relate to lived experience as the, the knowledge and hopefully also the wisdom that we carry through our body in a very somatic manner, through our biographies, through our memory, uh, also the cultural and the social contexts that we are a part of. So in that sense, it is knowledge that is situated in certain contexts, and if some contexts may be narrower and deeper, and others might be wider, perhaps, owing to circumstances and opportunities. Um, and yeah, and that I suppose also makes lived experience a little difficult to articulate in very conceptual terms because there's so much context involved in it. At the same time, I think it's important to recognize that lived experience is not universal truth. It is very partial, it is very perspective driven, and it operates through a lot of filters, right? The filters of my trauma, of my culture, of my identity, and of course my interpretation as well. So it's critical to not idolize uh, live experience. It's a powerful mechanism of knowing, but it definitely needs to be held along with other forms of knowledge, including critique, including critical thinking, and a relational way of knowing and being. So yeah, that's lived experience in the way I relate to it. Coming to artificial intelligence, well, I think of it as largely an externalization of our cognitive abilities as a human collective. Um, Not intelligence in the way we experience it as embodied beings, in the sense that while a lot of AI, developers and practitioners do contend today that AI already possesses self-awareness, because there have been multiple tests of late where AI has prevented its own systems shut down and so on, and there's increasing conversations therefore of the rights of AI and welfare of AI and so on. But yeah, in essence, AI doesn't really possess moral judgment, or I would think existential belonging. It processes information, it perhaps identifies patterns, and it can work at a sense of speed and scale that we are limited by. And having said that, it is also, I would also think of AI as one of the many tools in the human, technological lineage that we've developed, particularly in the last couple of centuries, in a very exponential way. Um, so AI, in that sense, can it mirrors both the capacities that we have in a purely intellectual sense, but it also very much mirrors our insecurities and our biases. So when I work with AI, I also think of I'm very cognizant of how much it forces me to confront uh, what I value, what my biases are, how it mirrors behaviors and patterns of the larger human collective, and how to engage with that. So yeah, if I describe both of these terms, AI and lived experience, in this manner, it can seem very disparate,
So
but to
what's the
me,
connection? That's my
yeah,
question. What's the connection?
the connection to me is that both of these seem to be uh, dominant currencies of our time. That lived experience is like this unassailable truth, and it can't be questioned, it can't be interrogated, and so it's one kind of a currency, and AI is treated as sort of efficient and data backed precise knowledge, and so in that it's treated as very infallible knowledge, right? So therefore, if you place them side by side, both of them are currencies which are heavily used and perhaps even weaponized, and therefore contribute to the dilemma of our time, that on the one hand knowledge is personal and it can't be challenged, and on the other hand knowledge is so impersonal that it loses all meaning and ethics. So yeah, that's where for me the connection lies. I don't think it's an easy connection, but it very much feels connected to each other.
Thank you. Thank you. And so when I asked you the question, I didn't really know where you would go with it. But at the same time, what you're talking about makes complete sense. And it gives me an opening to respond. Until now, and again, I'm just trying to make transparent my own thinking process, while I have, like most people, a zillion opinions about both these topics. I didn't know how to come into this conversation. And so, thank you so much for uh, doing the heavy lifting until now. But I feel you've given me something to hold on to. And here's how I am going to respond. The first thing that strikes me is, and I want to go back to the whole question of knowledge. How do we manufacture knowledge? And I'm not necessarily talking in postmodernist terms. Uh, I'm talking more in terms of how do we as ordinary people and how do we as a species know something to be true? Okay. Now, throughout history, we knew we understood the world through our senses, right? If berries were edible, rather, if berries did make us sick, they were edible. If berries killed uh, my cousin, they were poisonous. It was experiential. It was also through observation. We saw. And when we saw, we also were not just sentient, we were also capable of cognitively processing and interpreting what we saw or heard. Now, to that extent, for me, and this is where I have been very skeptical about lived experience. Because of my background in critical thinking, it has always been apparent to me that most people, everyone, each one of us has a unique lived experience. It's there. Okay. Even a 3-year-old has lived experience. And that by itself means nothing except to the individual. In fact, until the first universities were set up, whether it was in Takshashila in India or somewhere in Persia or wherever, or the Greek philosophers set up their schools, the whole idea of education was to step away from lived experience, because lived experience was completely subjective. And at the same time, it didn't necessarily allow for an accurate description of reality. So the whole idea of education for me is either best case lived experience plus objective learning about objective reality, and worst case transcending or getting away from lived experience because it was far too uh, emotional, reactive, personal, and subjective. So when I encountered this term starting about 20, 25 years ago, again coming out of the postmodernist American, of course, French educational system, uh, I was very baffled. We spent most of human history trying to move away from lived experience because of its evident limitations. And again, as a conflict management person, every conflict was a competition or a clash between two distinct lived experiences. That's the nature of conflict. And the difficulty of reconciling these two, or very often multiple lived experiences, gave rise to enormous violence and cruelties. So that's at one level. The purpose of education for me is to step away from, or to augment, which might be a gentler term, augment lived experience with a reason based, evidence based, objective understanding of reality. So that's one. This brings me to how knowledge is created. Again, I come back to my experiences as a teacher of critical thinking. And one of the things that I tell people is, and because you see, I've been teaching critical thinking since 88. And one of the things people would tell me uh, was, oh my God, I read this book and it blew my mind. It was so profound, it was so wise. And they would either talk about a Buddhist text, something the Dalai Lama or someone else wrote. They would talk about uh, uh, highly knowledgeable and wise writers and authors. And in the beginning, I, like many other people, I used to think of knowledge as something that could be transferred from a knowledgeable person to a not someone who didn't have that knowledge. And it took me many years of doing this work to realize that if I read something written by Mandela or Einstein or whoever I consider to be very knowledgeable or wise, I am not receiving their wisdom or knowledge. By the time I receive what they have written or taught, it is coming to me as pure information. It's not knowledge anymore. When I listen to you, Rukmini, and you have so much experience, and your understanding, like we were talking about the northeast of India before we officially started this session. Not a part of India I'm very familiar with, and you're talking about your experiences working with many of those tribes. I received it as pure information. My understanding of it is very limited compared to yours. And here's what I figured out about the process of developing knowledge. I have to take your information and convert it into knowledge. And that requires enormous processing. Reading a book doesn't allow for that processing unless I'm the kind of reader who, after every paragraph, I pause, I contemplate, I wrestle with the ideas before I move to the next paragraph. And most of us don't. We do speed reading. And when you're watching, reflect. And if you don't reflect, you are not building knowledge. You're merely acquiring enormous amount of information. Now, it's very possible that if I'm not paying attention to you talking, I'm not even picking up information. I'm just picking up data. So now when I come to artificial intelligence, whatever be the system, the technical magic which creates or allows for artificial intelligence to happen. It is really not in any way helping us develop knowledge. Whatever we take out of ChatGPT doesn't make us any the wiser. It doesn't make us any the more knowledgeable. We are merely absorbing it like empty calories. And here's where here's how I connect both these lived experience as well as artificial intelligence. Lived experience, you're right, and I don't want to dismiss it. There is a deep, intimate experience of a situation which is personal and has enormous meaning and may even deliver wisdom to us. So I'm not dismissing lived experience. But you said something which is very important, which I want to bring back. But it cannot be assumed that my lived experience in any way is the ultimate truth or unassailable knowledge. Lived experience is merely something like a scientist's hypothesis put out into the world to be tested. It's a hypothesis. Okay, I, as a 67 year old person from my background, here's how I experienced, let's just say, racism or inflation. It's my personal experience. And it may work for me. Sometimes it doesn't even work for me. It can make me prejudiced and to reality. But when I share it with you, I'm sharing it as a hypothesis that you can respond to and you can critique. Now, artificial intelligence, on the other hand, is also not even remotely anything to do with the truth or knowledge. Now, it's entirely possible that another 20 to 50 years, we may get unassailable knowledge coming out of artificial intelligence. All the quirks, all the idiosyncrasies may be ironed out, given how fast technology is developing. I mean, I wouldn't be surprised if AI becomes absolutely perfect. My problem with AI is not that it might mislead us. Like with lived experience, my problem with AI is that it is not my knowledge. I haven't done the hard work. As with lived experience, I have experienced it and I have gotten some insights from it. But unless I process that, struggle with it, wrestle with it, cross check it with other perspectives, cross check it with evidence, and, almost see if it can be falsified. It's not my knowledge. And worse, it has nothing to do with wisdom. So for me, and I'll stop here and feel free to jump in wherever you want to. I see both these as very dangerous ways of bypassing the hard work that is needed to really understand the world we live in. I'll give you one example. because I've lived around, this is my seventh decade. So I was born in 1958, and in a very socialist, very backward India. I have seen enormous change in just my lifetime. The knowledge that was enough, sufficient for my grandfather in the 60s, for my father in the 70s, is almost utterly irrelevant for me today. And that's the problem with subjective, personalized, lived experience. It's narrow. And today, uh, given the fast pace of change, even my understanding of how the economy works or democracy, my area, I've invested the last 15 years on democracy and human rights and free speech and liberal values. Everything has been completely destroyed. By that I mean my understanding of it has taken a huge beating merely in the last 3 to 5 years. So, and I'll end with this. My definition of a knowledgeable person, leave alone a wise person, is someone who has the capacity, even as the world spins and things are changing at a very fast pace, even as he or she is inundated with information, conflicting information, you are able to stay above the fray, look at what's happening, process this information selectively. Don't allow yourself to get overwhelmed, but selectively process this information and make decisions. I don't think AI can do that. And I definitely don't believe that lived experience is even remotely capable of helping us there. Feel free to, respond in any which way, uh, Rukmini.
Several threads emerging from what you've shared. Thinking about, I think there was this research published a few years ago about how uh, you know the amount of information that a person encountered in an entire lifetime, like in an average lifetime in the 19th century, is equivalent of one day's New York Times now. So the quantum of content that we are having to deal with is exponentially different if we were to look back at the trajectory of uh, knowledge that we've dealt with. Another question that pops up from what you shared is the need for learning, and where does that come from? AI in itself, of course, doesn't have needs, right? So it is programmed for efficiency, and that's what it is attempting to serve. And at the same time, like Sri Lakshmi has pointed out before on chat, it is also programmed with all our collective biases and conditioning, uh, and so even as it is wide in terms of knowledge, uh, it will still reflect our collective consciousness as humanity because we're designing it from a certain level of consciousness, and as 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 an entity that is fed by humans, it is not going to transcend our level of consciousness by itself because it does not have a need to do so. In that sense, our hope really lies in our humanity and the fact that we have needs, and hopefully one of those needs is learning. Uh, the purpose of which seems to be uh, becoming more and more elusive as we get along. I imagine also because the process of converting data into information and information into knowledge and then into wisdom is really inefficient, right? It is really messy as a process, and it is slow. It develops at the speed of trust, so to say. Uh, there is a lot of uncertainty involved in it, and so do we really care for that messiness anymore? Is a question that comes up for me. Um, and if we are living in an age where increasingly, whether we like it or not, we are already building systems where a lot of thinking is outsourced to algorithms, and in the social narrative, experiences are sort of you know experiences are in a way attributed to lived declarations. So in this age where we are living between these two extremes, um, does wisdom have any currency any longer? Because yeah, it requires inner labor, it requires moral imagination, but we seem to be moving in a direction where we are becoming more and more informationally rich, but existentially barren.
Great questions, Rukmini. And I'm going to contradict myself here in a very, very uh, uncomfortable way. When I look at politics, I mean, firstly, what I take away, the question that emerges for me from what you said is there a place for wisdom? Is it even necessary because the process of creating it is so inefficient? So that for me is a very profound question. And my biggest complaint with progressives who expect democracy to give them everything, freedom, rights, every minority, every newly fabricated minority, in the interest of diversity, equity, inclusion, must be given everything. Otherwise, we are living in an oppressive society. And I mean, not that anyone is interested in hearing this, but I have been trying to teach and write and tell my peers that you are completely misunderstanding the nature and purpose of democracy. The moment you give ordinary human beings the right to weigh in on matters of policy, on matters of governance, you are accepting a high level of inefficiency, as opposed to Plato's philosopher king, or, the most efficient democratic cabinet ever created or dictatorship ever created in a free and open society. It is unrealistic and even dangerous to expect things to work well all the time. So, this is a message I've been saying everywhere. Okay. And linked with that is the fact that we cannot come up with policies that are beyond the capacity of ordinary humans to manifest. If you create a law that requires me, Ashok, to be perfectly reasonable, perfectly rational, perfectly well behaved, have no road rage at all, that law will fail because Ashok is going to be eminently fallible all the time. So, given that that is my stance, here's when I have to respond to your question about wisdom, I'm going to go completely against my own reasoning. I believe that the only salvation for us as a species is to continue to strive to build robust knowledge, to aspire for wisdom, and not to cave in to the accelerated exponential pace at which technology, globalization, capitalism are changing the world. In fact, I would go to the extent of saying that if we give up on the idea that we should keep aspiring for what makes us to be truly human, we've lost the battle, we've lost the game, we've lost the plot. That if we, and I know you and I have been saying we should have a conversation on transhumanism, and I look forward to that. But for me, it would be the greatest betrayal that I or anyone else could do to our species if we merely acquiesced to the changes that are taking place and our uh, allowed the technologies, and by this I mean not just digital technologies, but economic and political technologies to change what makes us uniquely human. We need to be inefficient. We need to be messy. And I'll give you one anecdote. This just happened yesterday and it broke my heart. Some of you know that I'm finally trying to finish my book, and I'm a lousy editor. And using LinkedIn, I found an editor, very nice person, probably in her early 30s. She has a PhD, uh, and she's in the West Coast. And I gave her a couple of chapters, and she did a fairly okay job. I wanted to continue with her because I have a deadline. And her emails to me sounded as though they were coming out of a machine. Not that she was using AI, I'm not suggesting that, but they were legalistic and they were constantly drawing boundaries. This is what we agreed upon. This is what I'm going to be doing. And it's like we had that conversation 3 weeks ago, actually 2 months ago, and we started the work only about a couple of weeks ago because I got my material together, but only then. But I found that she was being completely transactional. And I'm from a different generation. Even if I go to the grocer or my cafe or I say hello to a stranger, my instinct is to be relational. And here, and I told her this, This is my life's work. I'm not trying to ask you to do anything more than we've contracted for. But please don't keep talking to me as though I were obliged to you or that I was an imposition. Because I've been a consultant literally for 45 years. From 1980-81, I've been a consultant. And as a consultant, no matter what the client needed or who the client was, I always saw it as a relationship. And this person who is, as I said, in her probably early 30s, does does not even understand what that means. She so we had another conversation later in the evening yesterday, and we decided to cut our ties. I'm just paying her for what she's done. But more than anything else, it's like I don't know how to talk or even be with this generation that grew up with the internet, with the personal computer, with smartphones. Because to me, they have already been completely dehumanized. Now, coming back to knowledge and wisdom, yes, it takes effort. And there's a connection, there's another reason why knowledge and wisdom are so important for us, because without that, we cannot have relationships, because all relationships are messy. If, however much two people love each other, mother and child, lovers, a relationship is absolutely messy, frustrating. And if we haven't, and this is a connection I'm going to draw, if we haven't done the hard work cognitively of trying to convert data to information, to knowledge, and hopefully to wisdom, when we are face to face with a human being who depends on us, when we're trying to build interdependencies, where will we get our capacity to relate to this person? Where will we? Will we use chat GPT? This is what my wife said. How should I respond to this? So I'm just going to put it that way. This is absolutely terrifying for me. We absolutely need the capacity for human, messy knowledge building. Can I ask? There are 3 responses here already, and because in our model we are trying to, in the interest of efficiency, respond, have people respond through chat and respond to them, uh, one by one. Would you, Rukmini, take Peter's response? He's talked of a few things. Is there, how would you respond to him?
I read Peter's as in a way, a reflection of how he's relating to our conversation around the distinctions between subjective and the objective standpoint. So, from what I understand, he's reflecting on uh, how that distinction is useful for him to process this conversation. That's how I'm reading what he's said. Um, uh, I also want to
Is
bounce
there
back
any
on a.
idea you'd like to take
Can
further?
I get a prize and a signature?
Okay, what size would you like for the signature?
Peter, could you
Look,
mute yourself?
No change to precise set?
Yeah, that's it. That's it. Thanks.
We're looking at 1702.
Ashok, are you able to mute Peter?
Sorry, am I able to mute? Is that the question?
Yes.
Sorry.
You're first.
Okay, I'll try. Yeah, I've muted Peter. Okay. But I would encourage Peter's Alex, both the Peters and Lakshmi, Sri Lakshmi, to ask questions also, because your questions will prompt us to think harder. And and your reflections, if we can add to your reflections, we certainly will do that too. So I think when I read what Peter has written, yes, it is a reflection on our conversation. But I think he's also raised one interesting notion, which is, and I'm going to read this out, the experience of lived experience. Converting information to knowledge requires community, a community of friendly critics. This is so important, and it links with what I have been struggling to say or articulate just a few minutes before. The reason, the primary thing that makes us human is relationships, is community. And my experience with this young lady yesterday, this editor, was that she had no interest in community, in relationships. She didn't even know how to do that. I genuinely, because I liked her, and it takes a lot of time to find competent people, and it took me months to find an editor. I didn't want to I didn't want to give up so easily and start the process all over again. And the dear young woman had no idea how to talk with me, no idea how to relate to me. I even tried showing her my vulnerability. I said, "This is my life's work. Yes, I want you to edit it, but I, I need you to." I didn't use the word respect, but maybe in a way that's what I meant. I need you to respect that I'm trusting you with my efforts. And I would like you to be conscious of it and not just act like uh, the ticket collector on the bus or the train. So it's because it's so important to have community. If you want to develop your information into knowledge and wisdom, and that happens. Peter used the term friendly critics. This is so important. Today, we have so many argumentative people, and social media is full of them, that they are neither friendly nor are they critics. They are abusers. And all knowledge comes out of friendly, critical engagement.
So when you say that, I'm also thinking of if I were to think of my relationship with learning, and for that matter, my relationship with a lot of other things in life, including how I relate to the idea of relationships in general, it's been hugely mediated by capitalism. Education was something I was taught to consume with the warning that if I don't do well in getting a degree or a diploma, I would end up doing the sort of manual labor that I may not enjoy. So I remember that warning coming to me multiple times all through school and university. Uh, so my relationship with uh, organized education has been that of a consumer.
I totally
So,
get it. I totally
so
get it.
while on the one hand, what we're saying here is that learning is not so much about knowing, in the sense that machines can know, AI can know stuff, and to some extent, perhaps even utilize that learning. Uh, from a human perspective, learning is about becoming, right? It
Right.
is about
Right.
uh, what I notice, what I learn to care about, what am I willing to stand for, and all of that requires conscious effort. Uh, and of course, AI can fill all sorts of knowledge gaps, but learning, if I truly engage with the process, is how I might cultivate discernment and humility and imagination and so on. Uh, but is that something I value enough to cultivate? Is a question right now.
Thank you. And I want to say that my experience is the same and completely different from yours. It is the same because I went through the same utterly unimaginative Indian educational system. It was criminally abusive. Okay. And on top of it, I went to Catholic and Methodist schools, which made it even worse. Okay. But at the same time, maybe the difference, I don't know about you, but because I was such a failure in the Indian academic system, that system did not touch me at all. Everything, I was an autodidact. By the time I was uh, in my third or fourth grade, I had read all the textbooks that I was interested in, like social studies, English, history, of high school students. I, I could never learn to the test. I still can't. Okay. If you quiz me on things I know, I will fail. I'm so terrified of tests. But the reason I make this is I think the mass of humans are incapable of real learning. And for them, the formalized, organized educational system, just like the formalized religious systems, it gives them the information necessary to conduct themselves in the real world. So I'm not in any way endorsing the conventional educational system, whether it be in India or the US or anywhere else. And I would suggest that we move away from that when we talk about not processing information and developing knowledge and wisdom, we step away completely from the capitalistic or commodified or consumerist version of that today. I would go to the extent of saying that while I loved my grandparents and admired them at multiple levels, I don't think they knew what they were doing in terms of their own learning. That didn't mean, because they were, my grandfather was, of course, educated. My grandmother, for those times, was relatively less educated. They definitely knew how to conduct themselves in their world. When they went, and in their generation, they went from the bullock cart to the automobile, they figured out how to adapt. I don't think that adaptation came out of any deep learning. They didn't necessarily figure out how those technologies affected their relationships, how it broke up their communities, how it broke up the extended family. When my mother got married, and immediately, to my dad, who lived 3,000 miles away, and she had to take an airplane to go there in 1957. They didn't relate it to the effects of technology and the breakup of the extended family. They just took it as something that happens. So when I'm talking about, and for me, this is the most vital aspect of what we are talking about today. Just as lived experience is an almost egotistical approach towards understanding reality. It's almost completely egotistical. AI is the opposite. It is outsourcing your own thinking to a machine to the extent that your ego is missing in action. It doesn't even exist anymore. And so I think the easiest thing for us to do, and I suspect we'll do this anyway, notwithstanding anything you or I say here, given the billions, even trillions of dollars that are being put into the development of AI, most of the world will sit comfortably with artificial intelligence. It will develop to such a sophisticated level that it will affect, and I don't want to be a doomsayer or a Cassandra, even though that's my natural alter ego. It will change everything about the world we live in, and it will change who we are as humans. People like me will be like the Luddites in the early days of the steam engine and the spinning jennies of the Industrial Revolution, raving and ranting and asking people to slow down and think and take time with the people in your life. I think it would be an enormous, enormous loss to us as a species. Just thinking about it is heartbreaking. And in a way, probably because I live in the US and not in Nigeria or India, I can already see it. I see it in the young people that I meet today. I see it even in my generation who people in Boston, some of my best friends from Boston, where I lived in the mid to late 90s and early 2000s, who I would have classified as extremely sensitive human beings. They don't have the attention span of a gnat anymore. And these are people in their 50s and 60s. So for me, this is a existential crisis. And perhaps I don't have any answers. But to go back to Peter's use of the term community, perhaps what is needed is for small tribes to hold on to their sentience and their cognitive capabilities. Perhaps we have to work extremely hard to find such co Homo sapiens. Because I don't think we will survive as a species the way we've understood the species these past couple of thousand years. It's just, I think the only way forward and mind watching is such a minuscule, it's not even a drop in the ocean, it's smaller than that. But I think those of us who value what it means to be human, we need to really find a way to cooperate, to attract each other, because otherwise we are going to get swamped. At this
What we
stage, I'd
have
like to.
mainstreamed is very different from what you're talking about, right?
Sorry,
Because
can you repeat that again? I missed that.
what we have mainstreamed as an aspiration for our growth collectively is very different from what you're talking about. So, uh, yeah, what I'm hearing from what you're saying is that we need to embark on a fight for learning, uh, as a fight to stay human in the way we know human.
Absolutely. In fact, when I started teaching critical thinking, I thought it was just a wonderful thing to do. And then within 5 years, I realized I had to fight for people to recognize the importance of their minds. I had to fight. People didn't value their minds. And then I started doing mediation and dialogue facilitation. And I realized, oh my God, I am fighting to get people to respect relationships. Most people don't. They are naturally transactional. Alex, you've been very quiet, and I cannot tell you how much I appreciate your being here. For the others, Alex and I were for a couple of years in the same high school in Kollam, Kerala, and he's now in Canada. Alex, would you like to share on chat any thoughts or questions or reflections? You can even, please, even you can even say, just speak.
Okay. Can you hear me?
Yes, sir.
Okay. Thanks, Ashok. I have to say, I don't know what to say because this is my first time in participating in a discussion of this kind, and I really don't know what to say because I, being the first session, I don't know what we are discussing in the sense, what are we trying to achieve here, right? So that's unclear to me. And of course, for me personally, I am an unabashed capitalist. So I don't know if I even belong here, right? So it appears that, yeah, for me, I'm not sure what is objective? What are we discussing? To what purpose?
I think that's a great question. And I'm so glad you asked that, because it's people like you that I really want to draw here. So the first thing I would say is that while uh, many of the people who would normally show up for my programs, many of them will be anti-capitalists. Many of them are also anti-racism, anti-sexism, anti-America, American foreign policy, and all that, and definitely anti-Trump. I do not subscribe to any of that. I am not anti-capitalist, not because I cannot see the problems inherent in capitalism, but I do know enough about economics to realize that there are very few sensible alternatives.
Mhm.
So, just to be clear on the capitalism stuff, and you're being, as you called, unabashed capitalist, because I know you're an entrepreneur and you built a big business and sold it. So you are, in a way, an archetypal capitalist. Your presence in these conversations is very important, because it's very easy for those of us who work in the nonprofit sector or in academia to trash capitalism without realizing that it's capitalism that pays our bills. Okay. So just to be clear of that, but you asked another very important question. What's the purpose of these conversations?
Mhm.
So thank you for asking that. And the simplest way of putting it is it's twofold. The first is people like me, Rukmini, and I'm guessing people like Peter, Baro, we work very intimately with matters related to democracy, politics, citizenship, liberal values, human rights. So that is where we come from. So on the face of it, this is another series of conversations on the things that matter in terms of our political existence. Whether we like it or not, whether you're a capitalist or a communist, or you're a trust fund baby who doesn't have to worry about any of these things, you are affected by politics. Like the old saw, you may not know anything about economics, but economics affects you. Similarly, politics affects us. I personally experienced this not only when I worked in the Middle East in an illiberal environment, but when Modi came to power in India in 2014, it changed everything to the extent that I had to leave. But that's just one part of it. The other is a little more ambiguous. Both Rukmini and I, professionally, we have been what is called dialogue facilitators. It's a strange field. It's a strange field because historically nobody has needed us. And it's very possible that in the next 5 years, nobody will need us anyway. Okay? But we come out of peace building and conflict resolution, and the idea is to get people who disagree with each other to come together and have constructive conversations. And for 30 years, I have been partially instrumental in crafting agreements between conflicting groups so that they could continue to coexist. And this could be labor management, it could be interreligious, it could be competing neighborhood groups, whatever. It could also be husbands and wives. So here's the thing, and here's the relationship between democracy and dialogue facilitation. People talk about how democracy is breaking down. And as a well-informed person, Alex, Canada itself is facing the brunt of Trump. But democracy, beyond the institutions and elections and checks and balances, as Tocqueville wrote when he traveled around the America in the, was it 18th century, democracy is in the ways in which ordinary people relate to each other. He gave the example of town halls in small, very small towns, where they came together to discuss the problems and where to put their money on a park or in a better sewage system. And they had to do this by talking to each other. And they couldn't afford to say, "You're a jerk, I'm out of here," because everything hinged on their being able to talk. So, the long way of answering, but because this is such a foundational question, what is the purpose of mind watching? Literally, it is to watch the mind, because most of us are reactive. We have knowledge or information, and when we encounter a situation, we just spew what we have. We are not conscious of what's happening in our minds, of the kind of choices we are making, intellectual choices, cognitive choices. So that's why we call this program Mind Watching Metacognitive Conversations. Now, metacognition merely means thinking about your thinking as you are thinking. Sounds very, very abstract, and probably is for a lot of people. But because of my interest in democracy, and because I'm totally committed to not just democracy, but how we make democracy work, which is through citizens who are capable of dialogue. This is an experiment Rukmini and I have brought together to try to have more mindful conversations, mostly about matters that are political or economic or philosophic or whatever. We, 2 or 3 sessions ago, we talked about love, ostensibly something that doesn't have anything to do with either economics or democracy. But it was a very, very important aspect of being human. So, anyway, I don't know if any of this resonates with you, but thank you for coming, Alex. And thank you for the foundational questions which helped me clarify, state out why we do this. And obviously, I would love to have not just you come back, but people like you come back. If this is not for you, I completely respect that. This is an acquired taste. It is even something that doesn't necessarily have much meaning for a lot of people, because we are not trying to solve problems here. There are other, in my professionally, for 30 odd years, the dialogues that I have convened and facilitated, we were trying to solve problems. And we solved some of them. Here, that's not it. It is to cultivate this inherent capacity to be very sensitive, conscious thinkers, listeners, and speakers. Any last thoughts from all of you? You can go on chat and put down at any level. It's not just about feedback, which I love. We need feedback, but it's also what are you taking away? What have you heard?
And how are you thinking about what have you heard?
Thank you, Peter. Appreciate your being here and appreciate your reflections. Alex and Sri Lakshmi. And then after that, I'll pass it over to Rukmini to wrap it up for us.
Yep. I think Sri Lakshmi should go. I've said my piece, and
Okay.
I think it's more clear to me now. So thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. Sri Lakshmi, your thoughts, please. What
Yeah,
are you leading with?
so I'm somehow okay, not somehow, but when I think of critical thinking, it's almost sort of for me synonymous with clarity. And when I was hearing you, hearing both of you, listening to both of you, I just realized that it's, I mean, it's not out there in, in a clear form, but one strives to get there. And, in the process of getting there, it's a lot of non-clarity. And I'm just staying with that to say that how can we continue to muddle with, through that, no? Because often these days, I like Rukmini keeps asking me, where are you? Like, I'm not anywhere around because I get tired talking to people, and then I'm like, I cannot manage this. Um, uh, so because there is an intense need within me to be able to see clearly with others, but I'm also realizing that it is not everyone can put themselves out there, because it also, when you say messy, it probably also means that we are going to fall flat on our faces many times, and I'm going to be making an idiot of myself, which I think I continue to make out of myself. So I'm just going out with a lot of happiness, to say that, I'll continue to be um, this idiot, and who will go on asking questions, and who will say that, what is this? Because oftentimes sometimes it's me versus perhaps another 1,000 or 100. But I just would like to, I think, stay with that, and uh, to be okay with that, and not have all the answers all the time, but to say that I'll not settle for anything lesser. Yeah.
So, and I love the fact that you are okay being an idiot, because if you are, this is the place for you. Rukmini, please wrap it up for us.
Oh, yeah, take off from where Sri left off around the idea of clarity and um, yeah, how we are taught to aspire for that, right? Where we think of education not so much as a process of uh, becoming human, but education as insurance to operate in life in a so-called successful manner. Um, then our entire relationship with life changes. So then learning, I mean, if you're consumed by that kind of education, then learning becomes a matter of certainty, it becomes a matter of staying relevant in society, and in that context, this whole movement and attraction towards AI makes a lot of sense because it fulfills all those agendas. And having said that, if we were to really go back to the idea of learning as a deliberate process of keeping ourselves uncomfortable so that we stay human and become more human in that process, that then it's a very different relationship, not just with the idea of learning, but a very different relationship with ourselves and with life. And it feels like at this point we are really standing at a crossroad around what is the kind of relationship we would maintain or develop with the idea of learning, both as individuals and as a collective. And if the critical mass is moving in a certain direction collectively, what happens to the stragglers who are hesitating at the crossroads? And where do we go with that is a question that I'm staying with as we wrap up today.
Thank you for that question. It's a great one to stay with. And thank you so much, Alex, Peter, Sri Lakshmi. I can't tell you how important it is to have at least 2 to 3 of you here, because otherwise, even though I don't mind talking with Rukmini on my just the two of us, it adds texture. Thank you so much, and do come whenever you can. It's the middle of the working day. I'm very conscious of this. It's an experiment. People said Sunday mornings were difficult, so we tried to do Friday
Will do.
afternoon.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye. Rukmini, you can stay for a second so that we can debrief.
Can I just,
Yes,
sorry, can
please,
I just,
Peter.
no, I just wanted to say thank you. It was an amazing dialogue between the two of you. I thoroughly enjoyed it. Too many things came to mind to even think about intervening, so I just wanted to listen. And I have to say, I pretty much agree with almost everything that each of the two of you said, and just would add one thing, which is that I think, you know, we talked about knowledge, and I would just distinguish again between knowledge and learning and what I know, and I think I'm in light.
You're breaking up, Peter. You're breaking up.
Very pessimistic and very worried.
Yeah.
Oh, I'm
Thank
so
you.
sorry. Okay, let's take
Okay.
Sure.
And
Okay.
Peter, I don't know if you can still hear us, but like we had Daniel last week, at least once a month, Rukmini and I would like to bring on guests who share not our values, but who appreciate this format. And someone like you would be a wonderful guest for us to have.
Well, I'd be delighted. We'll talk about it.
Excellent. Sounds good. In any case, we are talking next week.
Bye. Thank you.
Bye, Alex.
Bye.
Bye, Peter.